Funding for Spellbound Media is provided by nobody. Aw, man. Despite Michael Bay being one of the most well-recognized bad directors in the business, I feel like I've never seen anyone give the guy a fair shake. I mean, just recently, I found out that he never actually directed the modern live-action Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movies. All he did was produce them, and despite all the criticism I've seen thrown his way because of it. The nicest reception I've seen of anything he's directed is I've heard that some of his earlier Transformers movies have some qualities behind them. And there's also that Aaron Burr Got Milk commercial he directed, which people seem to be fond of, though I only know about that because of that one Nostalgia Critic video. Personally, I've only ever seen the second half of one of the Transformers films. Couldn't tell you which, but you know, I was in a hotel and it happened to be on and I watched the Autobots explode something or another, but that's about all I remember. And I think it's this near lack of association I've got with Bay that makes my plan perfect. My plan to watch every feature film Michael Bay has ever directed via release date order and decide if everyone's right and all he's got is explosions and boobies, or maybe, just maybe, I'll find that the guy can actually cook. Starting off with his first ever movie, Bad Boys, and as far as directing goes, I feel like it was a decent job. Sure, there's nothing exactly groundbreaking. This doesn't necessarily feel like a film only this one guy could direct. But you know what? It was incredibly competent, especially during the action sequences, which were consistently a delight. I mean, it makes sense it'd be good. This was nowhere near his first time directing. Just he pretty much stuck with music videos up until now, which, now that I say that out loud, might be why fast-paced movement does seem to be his forte. Let's just say the shots in this movie don't exactly linger, especially in the action sequences. Despite that truth, I do have to admit I feel as though the movie could have been a bit shorter, and the tone of the movie doesn't always feel consistent in a way where sometimes I feel myself being unable to tell what the current vibe was. Like, there's this one scene where Will Smith gets mad at Martin Lawrence, and it took me a bit to figure out if the scene was playful or dramatic, which isn't exactly an issue I'm used to experiencing in a movie. As for the actual movie, it stars two cops, the badass rich playboy Will Smith, and the dad who's the more badass of the two, played by Martin Lawrence, who they both protect Tia Leone. She's the witness to this major crime and is also a bit of a badass despite just being the whitest of women. There's this one scene, probably my favorite in the whole film, where she just walks away from the guy holding her at gunpoint after getting annoyed with him. The crime Leone witnessed has to do with this whole thing with a big drug deal that Will Smith and Martin Lawrence are trying to bust. There's this plot point where Martin Lawrence has to kind of pretend to be Will Smith, and like a bit vice versa. It's not actually that important. It's a situational comedy where there's a bunch of miscommunication hijinks, and that really isn't my thing, though some of the jokes do kinda land. Beyond that, it's just a solid action flick. Overall, I give this movie a 6 Will Smiths out of 10. Next on the list is The Rock, which is a Nick Cage movie about stopping a rogue military group who's taken over control of Alcatraz in order to blow it up San Francisco with a super deadly virus. And the only people who can stop it is Nick Cage's character, who's this virus and bomb expert, and also Sean Connery as an unstoppable force in the form of an ex-British MI5 agent turned escape artist and convict. In other words, this movie is genuinely so fucking good, y'all. I genuinely did not expect a film this fun and interesting when starting this. There's like a whole thing about the nature of trying to be remembered despite the government's constant attempt to keep hold of secrets. Not like the movie lingers on it too long though, because most of the movie is just Nick Cage and Sean Connery running around Alcatraz doing their best not to get shot. And you know what? That is the best part about this movie, so I cannot complain. If I had to criticize anything, the non-running action bits can often stay around a bit too long, and the movie takes a good bit to really get the ball rolling. But once it is rolling, it is absolutely worth the time of anyone who enjoys some good action. That and the music was also quite grand and really helped set the tone. 9 Sean Connery's accents out of 10. So Armageddon is a movie in which Bruce Willis and Ben Affleck fly to space and blow up an asteroid. Why was this 2 hours long? It was a shockingly boring movie. And sure, I technically did get spoiled beforehand that they do in fact blow up the asteroid. but I don't think that impacted my viewing experience all too much. The plot kept staying on its different beats for too long, and the action wasn't nearly good enough to justify waiting for it to happen, as it was really hard to tell what exactly was happening for most of it. And the action that was on the asteroid itself was way too dark, because, space and all that. The emotional beats felt very hollow too. It all revolved around Ben Affleck getting serious with Bruce Willis's daughter, Liv Taylor. And Bruce Willis doesn't like that for whatever reason. Liv Taylor is easily the most annoying character in the movie. No fault of Liv Taylor herself, I should add, but it kept cutting back to shots of her looking emotional. And it's like, yeah, I get she's worried and sad, but for the love of everything, please get on with the goddamn plot. She doesn't end up actually doing anything to contribute anyways. Though, to be fair, there's a lot of characters with a lot of screen time who don't end up contributing to the main mission in any way. Like Steve Buscemi, who plays an annoying and psychotic sex pest. And they keep trying to give him funny lines. It doesn't really work. But overall, this whole movie is a miss for me. I'll give it 3 asteroids out of 10. Pearl Harbor's first hour is all about a love triangle between 2 soldiers and 1 nurse, and the complications that arose after one of them was presumed dead for 3 months. Pearl Harbor's second hour is mindless violence and explosions. Pearl Harbor's third hour, because yes, this is a 3-hour movie. It's just Top Gun, but worse. I cannot stress how this movie feels like 3 distinct yet somehow equally boring movies. The pacing, awful. The characters, I don't even have it in me to go and explain because they're all boring and dull. There's the guy who likes the girl, there's the other guy who likes the same girl, there's this guy who stutters, there's the girl who likes the first 2 boys, and also Dan Aykroyd is there. I don't think I've experienced a worse script in my entire life. I've never written a movie before, but I truly, truly believe I can make a better Pearl Harbor movie than this. The action isn't even fun. You see one of Pearl Harbor's action set pieces and suddenly you've seen them all. And I've never seen a movie so spectacularly master the art of suddenly cutting to a scene about bullshit that doesn't matter. You don't need to show the Japanese planning Pearl Harbor for 20 minutes, Michael. I already know what happens, Michael. I learned about it in school, Michael. Learn how to cut scenes from your goddamn movie, Michael. This shit could have been 90 minutes. Fucking Jesus. The only reason this movie isn't getting a full 0 out of 10 is because Hawaii is pretty, and the music was also kind of pretty, but the story was so poorly fumbled that I feel like I could spend ages finding new things to be annoyed about. I give this movie 1 Harbor out of 10. But after that, nonsense. It's sequel time. And like most sequels, it's worse. Yeah, Bad Boys 2 was just kind of boring. The action occasionally did some things interesting, and the villain was fun, but the emotional stakes felt kind of ruined by the absolute mishandling of Martin Lawrence's character. In the first, he was uptight because he cared about his family and all, but here he's just kind of a dick, and keeps stopping the plot to complain about the same 3 things: how much he dislikes Will Smith, about how much stress he's under, and about how much he dislikes his sister being an undercover spy. This is honestly the most disappointed in a Bay movie I've been so far, though it isn't exactly the worst. It was just an extremely repetitive movie, whereas the first was genuinely exciting, with the only up this movie has on the first being the comedy, mostly because there's less gross out humor, though I think I only chuckled once at the rat scene. 4 out of 10 Will Smiths. Oh, and also, Bad Boys 3 isn't directed by Bay, if you're gonna ask why I'm not reviewing that one. Though what he did direct is The Island. The Island is quite noteworthy as being a movie with substance? Which I know sounds full on ludicrous to praise a movie for having something like that at this point, but after all I've been through, it was such a goddamn surprise to see. It's about Ewan McGregor and Scarlett Johansson living in the distant future of 2019 in a sort of fallout shelter waiting to win a lottery to go on to humanity's last island. Though in actuality, whenever somebody wins a lottery, they just get chopped up, because they're all actually clones. Like, Ewan is a clone of a guy who builds vehicles, and Scarlett is a clone of a model, and if vehicle builder Ewan or model Scarlett, or whichever rich person pays for the insurance policy, gets sick or whatever, then the big bad business people chop up the clone and save the life of the rich person. Which is like a fun idea. It makes you think about rich people hurting those beneath them, and the film really shows the benefits of remaining curious. And that's like not a whole lot, but honestly, for a Michael Bay film, it felt distinct and kind of exciting. The big issue is the action. The camera is way too shaky and things kept flashing at me, to the point where if I watched this in theaters, I probably would have got a massive migraine. So even though a lot of the action is cool conceptually, it was just hard to watch. There's other smaller issues, like how one of the clones gets pregnant even though they're scientifically engineered to not even consider the notion of sex. Ewan's shitty American accent was way too distracting. And this movie also kept up the trend of horny Steve Buscemi, which is a joke that never lands, and it's weird to see horny Steve Buscemi in 2 films, though at least he dies in this one. And also, he tells Clone McGregor about God by saying something along the lines of, when you close your eyes and you hope something bad happens, God is the guy who doesn't listen, which I think really cements this movie as the Spy Kids 2 of Michael Bay movies. So I'll give this 6 clones out of 10. Which means we can finally talk about it. The big one, the thing Michael Bay is known for. Transformers. The plot wasn't particularly fascinating, most of it boiling down to, dang, those Decepticons sure are rude dudes, hope some big, strong red and blue man can come blow them up. But still, it was pretty solid. I get I'm not exactly this movie's demographic of a middle school boy, but still, the action was well shot, the stunts were cool, and the Autobots looked great. The human stuff did take up most of the focus, rather than, the cool Autobot stuff. Megatron in particular felt super underutilized in the movie. But still, there's a sort of extreme patheticness to Shia LaBeouf's character that, while I'm sure was there to make him seem quirky and relatable to the average middle school boy, as a not that, it was weirdly kind of fun and also funny to watch him be this weird loser. I don't know if that makes any sense, but he was fun to watch. I'll say that. The amount of screen time the military had was also a surprise. A large part of this movie is a bunch of military guys having the worst day of their collective lives as Decepticons fuck with them, only for them to sorta kinda help out in the final battle against Megatron. Oh, and Megan Fox is in this movie. I feel like she and this movie are so intertwined in pop culture. She does have slightly more personality than I thought she would, but it's not by much. And the whole idea of a character whose main purpose in a movie is to stand around and look hot feels weird. Still, I give this movie a solid 6 robots in disguise out of 10. Which leads to the sequel, Transformers: Rise of the Fallen. I feel like the general consensus of these movies is that the first 2 are fairly decent, but the rest are shit. So if this is supposed to be a good Transformers movie, I can only fear what comes after this. This movie is so boring. It's incredibly similar to the first film in that it's Shia LaBeouf with a MacGuffin doing his best to survive an onslaught of Decepticon explosions while the US military does their absolute damnedest to stay relevant to the plot with middling results. I do feel really bad for LaBeouf's character though. He nearly gets sexually assaulted by a Decepticon that can transform into a human woman somehow, which Megan Fox berates him for, which that was upsetting to see. And then he gets tortured for information no more than 10 minutes later. Though, again, the plot doesn't really focus on the fact that he absolutely needs therapy once all this is done, because it's focused on the action and comedy. And while the spectacle of the action is certainly increased, it's actually a bit of the problem, because it leads to all the action scenes being way too long and feeling unfocused. The comedy is also just really rough. There's a solid 7-minute scene where Shia LaBeouf's mom accidentally eats weed brownies, and it was very hard to sit through. The plot was, in a lot of ways, a retread of the first one, essentially the same MacGuffin and everything. Also, just in general, the Autobots are kind of losing their spectacle. Probably because it's a sequel, but still. The one thing I do think this movie gets right is the villains, because they're very fun with just how comically evil they are, so 5 traumatized Shia LaBeoufs out of 10. After that, Bay kept the Transformers ball rolling with Dark of the Moon. This movie immediately falls into a lot of the same trappings as the second. This movie does everything the last two did. It's about Shia LaBeouf running around getting nearly murdered by Decepticons until Optimus Prime shows up in the last 10 minutes to win the movie. I still think this is the best one so far, and I think that's because the human element was a lot more interesting. They finally let the humans kill a few Decepticons, and that makes the role in the action a bit more fun. LaBeouf was also funnier in this movie, with this being the first Transformers movie that actually gave me a quick chuckle. I forget where exactly, but I just remember LaBeouf shouting at something and finding that funny. Which isn't a lot, but still. Though this is the third or fourth time that they did the whole kinda sounds like these two dudes are gay, but they're actually talking about something else shtick, which is a weirdly specific joke that happened in here, Bad Boys 2, The Island, and I think maybe something else. It's getting hard to remember. Though back to positives, this movie's villain, Sentinel, is my favorite yet. The idea of a twist villain works well with this kind of plot, and he has a motive that's more than just due to hatred of humanity. He also used to be Optimus's friend, which makes his final fight with Optimus feel slightly more interesting than just, oh look, Optimus is here, guess the movie is over. Generally, the movie's biggest flaw is just that the ending fight was too long. They did a whole bit where it looks like they're gonna kill Bumblebee, and then, gads, guess they didn't. Who could have seen that coming? But that's just one of the many action beats that really didn't have to be here. Though I do like how instead of fighting in some desert, they fought in Chicago this time, and seeing Illinois get destroyed is inherently satisfying to watch. But also the city makes for a more fun action set piece, what with all the falling buildings and whatnot. Overall, if someone said that they wanted to watch a Transformers movie, so far this is the movie I tell them to watch. Especially since I have heard ruminations on what 4 and 5 are like, and I'm just going to appreciate the fact that at least this movie was alright. I'll give it 6 replaced Megan Foxes out of 10. Now with that out of the way, I finally got a break from Transformers movies for one movie, but that movie is Pain and Gain. This movie did something that no other Bay film has done before. This movie, genuinely, and I can't believe I'm about to say this, but this movie doesn't have a single goddamn explosion. I mean, unless you count like the firing of a gun, but I don't. Probably due to the whole true story thing, though from what I saw from a quick glance at the old Google, the movie seemed to have taken a few liberties with the plot here and there, so really it might just be Bay was a bit tired from the explosion fest that was the Transformers trilogy. This movie is really good, actually. I couldn't properly believe it because sure I was positive about Transformers 3, but that was me ranking it like as a Michael Bay movie. This might just be an actual good movie. It's got a dogshit rating on all the rating sites, so maybe I've just experienced total and devastating Michael Bay flavored brain rot. But I thought this movie had a really fun style, what with the constant use of voiceover narrations. The acting was genuinely great. Mark Wahlberg, Anthony Mackie, Joan Johnson, Ed Harris, and especially Michael Rispoli as Frank Riga. Characters do things that are actually interesting. Bay's best characters have always been people who are total assholes, so focusing on a bunch of shitty kidnappers was a really solid move. The plot, by the way, is Wahlberg, Anthony Mackie, and Dwayne Johnson kidnap a guy, and then murder 2 other people, and then go to jail. Doesn't sound like it'd be a movie that lasts 2 hours, but you know what? I was engaged the whole way through. Mark and Dwayne were the real highlights though. Admittedly, all Anthony Mackie really got was erectile dysfunction, and all the humor regarding that was probably the low points of the movie, though it doesn't distract too bad from its highs. Speaking of high, Dwayne Johnson as a religious zealot/drug addict was consistently super fun to watch. And the way Mark Wahlberg always tried to keep himself in this weird, just following the American dream moral high ground whilst doing more and more heinous shit as time went on made him like a really fun character. You know, it's been 8 movies since I've had the honor of doing this, but I think I ought to give this movie 9 small Anthony Mackie penises out of 10. Though after that surprising delight of a movie, we are now back in Transformers Hell with Age of Extinction. This movie does differ itself from the Shia LaBeouf trilogy by having a new protagonist in the form of Texan dad inventor guy Mark Wahlberg. The movie also has a darker tone, probably in order to appeal to the older kids that the original movies first appealed to, which makes sense, though darker doesn't necessarily mean better. It just means that the main trio of characters aren't exactly likable, and also TJ Miller gets a weirdly disturbing death. Wahlberg himself is fine, but his daughter Nicola Beckham has about all the flaws you'd expect a chick to have in a Michael Bay movie. She's annoying, she cries a lot, she doesn't add too much to the plot, but at least she's still better than her boyfriend. See, even as someone who doesn't know a whole ton of Michael Bay movies, I still knew about the infamous Romeo and Juliet clause scene. See, despite both actors playing older than their characters, Nicola's character is a 17-year-old, while Jack Rayner's character, a character who is in a physical relationship with Nicola's character, is 20 years old. I know it's a 3-year age gap, but those are 3 very important years. As a 20-year-old myself, the idea of their relationship is just so fucking grody. It makes my skin crawl. The movie tries to justify the relationship by talking about the Texas Romeo and Juliet clause, which apparently the film got totally wrong, which adds to the whole vibe that this scene is just a little too real. Even if the actual scene itself does kind of feel like it's played up as a joke, it also goes beyond just them mentioning the clause. Wahlberg's whole fucking character arc revolved around him becoming chill with this creepazoid dating his daughter. Like the writers were trying to manifest a world in which this was okay. Also, just a reminder, this is a movie with robot dinosaurs that breathe fire. I mean, they're barely in the movie, but still, how did you manage to fuck up the boring human plot so badly it becomes the entire conversation around a movie? Even if I try to ignore the weird relationship, this movie is intensely dislikable. The movie has a plot that's way too bloated, 3 contrasting villains, all to culminate in the most boring final fight of the series, because even the Transformers couldn't escape in the suckification black hole that is this entry, because Optimus now hates humans, even though his convictions were what made him interesting. Bumblebee is a petty bitch, the rest of the Transformers weren't any better, especially that annoying samurai one, despite its cool design. Actually, the new designs are the best part. This movie almost definitely made some absolute baller toys. So at least there's that, though I'm not a fan of the robot dogs. Watching Mark Wahlberg shoot robot dogs made me feel sad for the dogs. I'd rather he just killed people, like a moral person. So with that all said and done, I think this movie gets 1 tossed salad and scrambled egg out of 10. But before we can finish off the last Bay-directed Transformers movie, we gotta talk about 13 Hours. 13 Hours being a movie about a group of bodyguards for CIA operatives in Libya as they undergo hell from an enemy Libyan faction. Apparently this movie, like Pain and Gain, and I guess also Pearl Harbor, is based on a true story, though the accuracy, like Pain and Gain, has been put into question. Though again, I didn't look into it too much. You know those dumb military segments from the LaBeouf Transformers trilogy? You know, the ones so dull I didn't really talk about them at all? But yeah, this movie is like if that were 2.5 hours long, and there's no epic robots. The big issue is the main cast feel like the same character. They're all badasses with strong moral compasses, and they're just dads who just want to see their families again. Like, I finished the movie and I could not tell you a meaningful difference between John Krasinski, James Dale, and David Denham's characters. The main hook this movie has is making people question whether these characters are going to live or die, because beyond that, this movie is just military action scenes. And because the characters are just so dull, despite the actors' best attempts, the plot just feels like an excuse to have explosions, as the rest of the story is on par with a singular level in a lesser Call of Duty game. 1 gem from The Office out of 10. Which leads us to the last Transformers film that Bay directed, Transformers: The Last Knight. This is widely regarded as the worst in the series, boasting the worst IMDb rating out of any live-action Transformers movie. And after watching this movie, after processing this movie, I think everybody's kind of full of shit. This movie rules. No, I'm not kidding. Genuinely my favorite of the Transformers movies. I think I might have fully lost my mind, but like, hear me out. Metal Space Dragons. This is the funniest movie in the series too. Its default girl is way more charming and likable than any of the others so far. There's this old British dude who's a bit of an oddball, who winds up threatening the Prime Minister with the clock that killed Hitler, and then he goes on to shoot Megatron in the span of like 30 minutes. He's easily the best character in any of these movies. Sorry to any Shia LaBeouf stands, but my goat Sir Edmund Burton remained supreme. I really fucked with the combining of Arthurian legend with the Transformers aesthetic, Oh, and Hot Rod, a French transformer who can make, like, time-stopping bubbles. He's cool as fuck. Where's his movie? I'd watch the shit out of that. Admittedly, I'm not a blind stan of this movie, as this movie does sometimes focus too much on explaining plot when it could be doing a bit more action. But sometimes, during the middle of that plot explaining, they randomly put in a scene where World War II Bumblebee shoots a bunch of Nazis. Again, this movie is sick as hell. Why am I the only one who sees it? Has Bay broken me, or has he simply just allowed me to see the truth that everyone else is too cowardly to see? Also, it's important to note that this movie confirms that Shia LaBeouf fucking died randomly off screen. They killed the protagonist of the main Transformers trilogy off screen, and frankly, that's the funniest goddamn thing in any of these movies. That shit got me bemused. If I had a quarter for every time Shia LaBeouf played a major character in a franchise, and then just managed to die off screen, I'd have 2 quarters. Which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. Also, for the plot, it's very similar to movie 3 in that Cybertron the planet is the main Doomsday device, but it looks so cool and they do weird gravity shit with it, so it's chill. And I can hear you, you filthy naysayers in the comments, but I will remain strong in my convictions. My convictions that this movie is a whole ass 9 Sir Edmund Burtons out of 10. With that, 2 more films to go, at least until Robopocalypse releases. Don't know anything about the movie, but damn if that ain't one hell of a name. Either way, our penultimate film goes by the title of Six Underground. It's alright. It's about Ryan Reynolds assembling a crew of talented people of 6, who all fake their own deaths in order to become a little ghost squad dead set on doing a coup. Simple concept, yet the film keeps needing to reiterate the point over and over again. Coup goes fairly well, 1 team member dies, but his replacement, Seven, arguably the protagonist of the movie, is probably also the best character in the film. Maybe because they're one of the only characters in the film who do things beyond just shooting guys and making pop culture references. Because yes, this is a movie in 2019 starring Ryan Reynolds. Of course, this movie needs to keep stopping in order to keep referencing pop culture with a disturbing amount of Leave It to Beaver references, which unfortunately I never found particularly funny, though the action was better than the average Bay film, so hey, if you want nice, easily digestible jokes, a simple little found family story, and a bunch of classic Bay explosions and solid action, you can't exactly go wrong with this movie. 7 pop culture references out of 10. So here we are, Michael Bay's final movie. I mean, until he makes another one. But it's 2024 and that hasn't happened yet. So here we are, Ambulance. Like the vehicle. And you know what? What a great way to end things off. This film is ostensibly about an ambulance taking the long route on the way to the hospital. And by long route, I do mean the driver of the ambulance gets carjacked by 2 bank robbers, leaving the EMT, wonderfully played by Isaac Gonzalez, having to balance being a hostage with saving the life of the guy who was shot by the 2 robbers, one of which is slowly realizing he has to right his wrongs, while the other is slowly going insane over the amount of pressure he's under. After all, the police are after them the entire way through, as they're really shitty bank robbers, all things considered. The fact that this movie has an hour and a half long car chase does mean the middle has some duller segments, but it never gets too bad, and the beginning is great. The ending is probably one of my favorites, if not my favorite, of this entire watch through. Speaking of, this movie also references a lot of Bay's older movies, which was funny for me and me specifically, meaning this was a great way to end this project. This is also the first Bay film to have a named gay character. He plays the main de-escalator guy. He was decent. 9 ambulances out of 10. And after that, I've done it. I have done what nobody else has had the power to do before. I watched 15 movies of varying quality. The gods could not replicate this process no matter how hard they tried. No, only I could do such a feat. But this process has done things to my mind and body. I am no longer the Robin you once knew. I can feel it. I can feel myself transforming into an award show host. Ba-da-da-da. I have now watched every single one of these fucking things, and I am desperately trying to make this video not seem like a total Trey Frillis Productions knockoff, even though it absolutely is. So I decided to give out some official Spellbound Media awards to the films. You get it. Starting off with Best Side Character, and while we've got a solid few picks to choose from, such as Sir Edmund Burton from Transformers The Last Knight, Dwayne Johnson in Pain and Gain, and T. Leone in Bad Boys the First, you know I gotta go with Sean Connery from The Rock. Damn near just on voice alone, like sheesh. Next up is Best Antagonist. Which villain really stole the spotlight? Was it Megatron? Was it that guy from Bad Boys 2? Was it Jake Gyllenhaal from Ambulance? Probably, but I was too unsure if that guy counted, so we're going with the PI from Pain and Gain because he was basically Columbo, and like, I fuck with Columbo, what else can I say? And now it's time for me to do a little bit of harkening back when I put into question if all Michael Bay had was explosions and boobies, and that was, in part, me putting into question Michael Bay's ability to actually have good female characters in his films, or if they are all like Megan Fox in the Transformers movies, who was just there for the sex appeal. And you know, plenty of these films don't exactly pass the Bechdel test. A lot of films had chicks in them purely either for other characters and or the audience to be like, pretty, or for someone to cry while some dude bro goes and does action. This is especially true from like Armageddon to Age of Extinction, which admittedly makes up most of Bay's movies. Sure, T. Leone was iconic in Bad Boys 1, sure that British lady in The Last Knight was cool, and the two chicks in Six Underground were fun, but when handing out the award for Best Female Character in a Michael Bay movie, there's only one proper answer, and that's of course Eiza Gonzalez as EMT Cam Thompson in Ambulance. Her character was the driving force of that movie that made it as good as it was, and my desire to see her live in spite of all of her odds was what kept the movie interesting, even when the rest of the plot wasn't exactly pulling its weight. Eiza and her script did a legit great job, and I hope more of Bay's movies in the future can continue to feel like its female cast isn't just there to be ogled at by a male audience. After that, we got Best Protagonist. No, it's not motherfucking Shia LaBeouf. Weirdly enough, it's probably Mark Wahlberg, but in Pain and Gain, not in the Transformers movies. Dear God, no. Never expected to actually like him in anything, and I guess I still don't, because he plays an absolute loser jerk in that movie, but credit where credit's due, he played him well, so that just saves the awards for Best and Worst Movie. Let's make sure to end on a positive note. So that leaves the Worst Movie Award. There were some proper stinkers. 13 Hours, Transformers 4, Armageddon. Bay's got a lot of doozies under his belt, not gonna lie. Every single film, even the ones I did like, managed to be a bit too long, with action a bit too shaky, but nothing was quite as bad as Pearl Harbor. Genuinely might qualify for my all-time least favorite movie. I just couldn't stand the thing. The characters were flat. I mean, I'd accuse the damn thing of having a plot written by ChatGPT if it had come out so long ago. Other than that, this movie was brutally unfocused, kept changing what it wanted to be, couldn't decide on whether it was a Titanic ripoff or a Top Gun ripoff, neither of which is particularly good at being. It's also just a prime example of blatant military propaganda, which is a very regular thing in his first batch of films, and it always feels a little uncomfortable, especially knowing his usual target audience. Though later on he definitely cools it with being pro-US military, though still clearly pro-US soldiers. Best scene in The Last Knight, where a bunch of soldiers on their way to the final fight rip off their military patches because they disagree with the government being mean to the illegal aliens, as in like the Autobots, and it's very much seen as a positive thing, which is stuff I can personally fuck with a lot more than what the first three movies did, which were essentially be big advertisements for the military, as in the military gave them some money and some military shit in trade for good military representation. A trend in Bay films which I suspect started in Pearl Harbor. Either way, the movie sucks ass, and not in a fun way either, it's just bad. And that leaves Best Film Award, and while there were plenty of Bay films I did like, more likely than not due to the absolute damage that Michael Bay has done to my mind, body, and soul, but still, films like Ambulance, Pain and Gain, and yes, even Transformers The Last Knight, I promise it's good, I'm not crazy. Nothing managed to top Bay's second ever film, The Rock. It's the only movie on the list I have any real desire to rewatch, and why wouldn't I? It's got Sean Connery as a badass escape artist. What else does a movie need? It's fun, and that's kind of what Michael Bay movies are for. They're for fun. Sure, not all of them succeed, but hell, that leads to its own kind of fun. Not everything needs to be artsy, not everything needs to make you sit down for a second and think about life for a moment. Art can be so many things, and sometimes that thing is just good fun. And damn it, if The Rock ain't good fun, then I don't know what is. So, that's my thoughts on every Michael Bay movie. Honestly, I guess I should give a few thoughts on Michael Bay as a director. Is he actually as bad as everyone says? No. Well, not always. Some of his stuff is arguably worse. And that doesn't mean he's totally talentless. I'm sure there's plenty of directors worse than him, though I think his pacing could be better, and his comedy desperately needs work, with moments that either felt racially charged or just full-on creepy. Though it is mostly contained within the Transformers movies, gotta be real. Don't know how much of it is Michael or how much of it is some fucked up Warner Bros. Executive. Personally did not look into it. Hell, I didn't even read an interview or anything with Michael because I didn't want to get too parasocial. And I think in keeping with that, I'm not going to make any bold claims about the guy himself, but I still think Michael Bay as a director has more to give, because though there is absolutely a rough, that doesn't mean there isn't a diamond or two. So, yeah, there's that. I don't know, probably a lesson we learn about judging a book by its IMDb score or some shit, but I've just watched literally every Michael Bay movie, and I think I need a nap now. Oh, but before I forget, we've got one more award. I almost forgot. It's a pretty cool one, too. It's the Best Song Award, and, well, for me, that's pretty simple. It's